Well, shalom, my name is Todd Bennett, and this is the weekly audio recording of the Shema Yisrael newsletter that was entitled Exploring Worship to Our Service. Well, this was originally published on day 13th of month 5 on the Creator's calendar, otherwise known as July 20th, 2024 on the Roman calendar. And I mentioned previously that it's hard to listen and hear the quiet whisper of Yahuwah with all the noise that's going on in the world around us. I also talked about Julius Caesar's assassination and the fact that this Roman month of July was named after the assassinated Roman emperor. Well, what a month this has been so far. Well, Joe Biden was being figuratively stabbed in the back and undergoing a political assassination by many of his fellow Democrats. Donald Trump just experienced a physical attempted assassination with a bullet. Now, I didn't mention anything about it in my previous message because it had just occurred, and over the past week, though, it's just about all people have been talking about in America and throughout the world. Theories are abounding and fingers are pointing. And what I find truly amazing is how easy it is to control the national conversation. The entire country was discussing President Biden's mental capacity the week prior. Then, following that, the week prior to this message being delivered, the national conversation all focused on the assassination attempt and the Republican National Convention. It was definitely a great week for former President Trump. His stock went way up, and he got some iconic photos to boot. I can only imagine what's next. Will it be a global cyber attack or President Biden withdrawing from the race? Was there a second shooter? Stay tuned. News at 11. In fact, as I'm recording this, the news just actually came out that President Biden is withdrawing from the race. So it happened pretty much as many people expected. So that's what they'll be talking about, I'm sure, for the upcoming week. So whatever it is, though, this is bound to be an interesting summer and fall leading up to the presidential election. Apparently, the fate of the republic and the world are hinging on this election. Democrats fear the end of democracy, despite the fact that America is a federal republic. And the Republicans fear the loss of personal liberties and a collapse into outright socialism. The stakes are high. At least that's what we're being told by the mainstream media. And that is my concern. We're witnessing many orchestrated events, such as wars, pandemics, food shortages, and economic collapses, to name a few. And these are all consuming the attention of the masses and creating fear, trepidation, and a myriad of other emotions. You can either get drawn into the narrative or you can remain set apart. A lot of it depends on what you believe and where you get your news. Some are now referring to the mainstream media as the Mockingbird media due to the CIA project Mockingbird, aimed at manipulating domestic American news media organizations for propaganda purposes. Most people don't notice it because they tend to gravitate to their favorite news source. They don't realize that all of the news outlets are generally talking about the same thing, gleaned from either Reuters or the Associated Press, which are Illuminati essentially operated news outlets. They simply add their unique spin or political slant to the news and then report it to their audience. The manipulation of news and the control of the media has turned out to be an amazingly effective tool to keep people distracted and their attention diverted. Kind of like focusing on Lee Harvey Oswald and the Texas Book Depository building rather than the grassy knoll. I couldn't resist, but I'm sure you know what I mean by that. Well, there's no doubt that the powers that be are manipulating and herding the masses like sheep to the slaughter. Amidst all the manipulation and deception, it's important that the followers of Yeshua not get caught up in the endless news cycle, including all the hype and the political rhetoric. It's all a distraction from our chosen purpose, to worship Elohim. Case in point, the fact that Donald Trump was not killed during the assassination attempt has many people attributing it to the hand of God. It has energized people and stirred both a patriotic and a religious emotional response. Many have then taken the next step and determined that if God protected this guy, then Trump must be God's man. The logic goes that since he's chosen, then we need to stand with him. It's God's will. Well, this is where I see people mixing politics with religion, and that can end up making politics their religion. It's what Christian nationalists are currently doing, and it's problematic when it comes to their faith. I find that many of these people are also Christian Zionists, and it makes sense because they use the same logic. Most Christian Zionists believe that the Jewish people are God's chosen people. They then believe that the formation of the modern state of Israel in 1948 was a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. Based upon these presumptions, they then feel that they must stand with Israel, and even support a genocide with money, bombs, and munitions. Of course, AIPAC, the American Israel Political Affairs Committee, buys the support of most American politicians to ensure that Israel gets all the weapons and money they need, and Christian Zionists then press and support those politicians to do exactly what AIPAC wants them to do. Christian Zionists have actually merged religion and politics on the issue of the modern state of Israel, and they're walking in error because they do not understand the covenant plan of Yahuwah, or the renewed covenant instituted by Messiah. The presumptions of the Christian nationalists and the Christian Zionists do not support their response if they really believe in the Messiah described in the Bibles. And indeed, they've lost sight on the spiritual and are focused primarily on the flesh. The Christian Zionists who support former President Trump because of their religious beliefs are putting their faith in a man who comes with a lot of baggage. While former President Trump obviously has a purpose in this end-time scenario that is taking shape around the world, his purpose could either be good or bad. Some people simply like him because he's a gangster and a fighter. They look at him as an underdog that the deep state's trying to destroy. They like his grit and his bravado. Others think that he's a good leader and that his policies will help the economy. Well, after the assassination attempt, he's risen to superstar status, and I heard one commentator state that in Asia they're treating him like an older Taylor Swift. No matter what the reason, Trump's popularity sure went through the roof following the events of that Shabbat when the assassination attempt took place. Well, interestingly, if he'd been in his dwelling on Shabbat resting, as Yahuwah commands, the entire situation would never have happened. Of course, he doesn't observe the Sabbath, and if he had been in his Trump Tower penthouse observing Shabbat, he would have been surrounded by images of Apollo and statues of pagan gods and goddesses. Obviously, this is specifically prohibited by the commandments, as we've been discussing through the past messages. I've not seen any evidence that Donald Trump follows the directions of Yahuwah. Indeed, no one was set apart on that day of the assassination attempt, and that strikes at the heart of the issue. Those who are set apart need to remain set apart and not go mixing with the world. Most Christian nationalists are not set apart. They don't see the need to be set apart, and that's why they don't have a problem blending politics with their religion. Well, Yeshua made a clear distinction between the two. Donald Trump is not trying to lead America on a quest for humility and repentance. He's not trying to lead people to Yahuwah and his commandments. He's simply trying to make America great once again. While Donald Trump's popularity went up after the assassination attempt, I was certainly saddened at the death of the attendee identified as being killed, and I heard witness reports describe how the family was in utter shock and couldn't leave his body, and I can't imagine how it would feel to suddenly see a loved one get shot and instantly killed right before your eyes, especially when you're at an event that is exciting and supposed to be fun. It's a reminder that we're all just one heartbeat away from Sheol. And we owe every breath to our Creator. The very thought of it should lead us to a place of humility and thanksgiving. And it's easy to take things for granted and lose our focus, especially in this whirlwind existence that we find ourselves in. Deep down, most of us just want to live lives of peace, and we desire the best for our loved ones and our friends. We hope our children grow up safe and healthy, and we all desire to live long, full lives surrounded by generations of family. That's simply the reality of living in this physical realm. These are basic desires that most all people share, and there's nothing wrong with that. The ancient Israelites wanted that as well. They wanted to settle down after leaving Egypt, but they ended up experiencing a delay in plans due to the golden calf incidents. They lost focus and strayed from the righteous path. If they'd just been patient and obedient, things would have been different. Their actions were a breach of their agreement with Yahuwah, and it resulted in the covenant being broken, literally. Well, that required Moses to ascend the mountain to mediate for their very lives, and that's where we are in the covenant journey after Passover. We are past Shavuot, and we're now looking ahead at the appointed times of month 7. Well, oftentimes people don't know what to think about this gap in time between the appointed times. Things are busy preparing for Passover, followed by a 7-day feast. During that feast, we begin counting to another feast. And after Shavuot, it all seems to stop. Well, right now, we should be thinking about a mediator up on the mountain, making intercession for us down below. That's what Moses was doing on the mountain during this period of time, and that's what Yeshua is currently doing for us now, literally. Not only are we in this period of time during the annual cycle of appointed times between month 3 and month 7, we're also in this period of the fulfillment following the death, burial, resurrection, and ascension of Yeshua. Those items were fulfilled during the feast that we passed, and we're waiting down below, anxiously anticipating the return of Yeshua to fulfill the rehearsals of month 7. And we're still in the wilderness, waiting. Well, the Israelites were uncomfortable in the wilderness. They didn't like the food, the drinks, or the accommodations. They were ready to check out and give the whole experience a 1-star review. Amazingly, even after the idolatry involving the golden calf and the subsequent renewal, the children of Israel put Yahuwah to the test 3 more times. They complained about the difficulties they were experiencing in the wilderness. They complained about food and the manna. And eventually they complained about the land that Yahuwah was bringing them into and the leaders who brought them there. Moses sent out 12 to spy out the land and for 40 days. And here's their report. It says, now they departed and came back to Moses and Aaron and all the congregation of the children of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them and all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. Then they told him and said, we went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the lands of the Jordan. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature. There we saw the giants, the descendants of Anak came from the giants, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. After hearing about the land and its inhabitants, the people believed the bad report of the 10. Like most people, they went with the majority, safety in numbers. At least that's what they thought. Well, as a result, they went into a panic. So all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron. And the whole congregation said to them, if only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in this wilderness. Why has Yahuwah brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? So they said to one another, let us select a leader and return to Egypt. Well, the people did not like the report that came from 10 of the 12 spies. Oh, sure, it was a good land, but there were giants in the land. It didn't sound safe. The people essentially believed that Yahuwah was going to lead them and their families to their deaths. We just commemorated the event last week on day 9 of month 5. Well, as a result of believing the bad report, they wanted hope and change. They wanted new leaders to bring them back to Egypt. They were ready to make Egypt great again. Of course, I've witnessed a similar response from people over the past 24 years as I've traveled to the Covenant Land. I can't tell you the number of people that have asked me, is it safe? They typically tell me how they would love to see the land someday when things calm down. Well, all I can say is that if you live in fear, you will never leave your house. And that's actually the goal of the rulers of evil these days. If you simply sit at home and consume their news, or should I say propaganda, then you're much easier to control. Well, many people today have literally been traumatized by what they experienced over the past 4 years and by what they see on the horizon. They're witnessing pure evil consume the planet. They're scared and confused, and they want a leader, a Messiah, someone who makes them feel safe. They haven't seen Jesus return, and they haven't been raptured, and things keep getting worse, and they're ready for a leader. They'll follow just about anyone who will give them some hope. Well, I get it. But we need to stay patient. Don't start looking for somebody just because Yeshua tarries. That's what the Israelites did, and they ended up worshiping something gold and shiny. I see people chasing after a man who owns a gold tower named after himself. He runs in the same circles as the deep state, and he has a new VP choice, and they both received substantial support from none other than Peter Thiel and companies that he founded, such as Palantir and Clearview AI. These companies collaborate with the CIA and are at the forefront of the surveillance apparatus that most Trump supporters are against. Thiel has essentially supported the career of J.D. Vance and seemingly groomed him for such a time as this. The tech companies that are implementing the deep state agenda are now pouring enormous amounts of money into the Trump campaign, and I'm quite sure that most Trump supporters are completely oblivious to what is lurking in the shadows. Again, they love their man, but things are not always as they seem, and Yeshua specifically warned for false messiahs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, even if possible, even the elect. See, I've told you beforehand. Well, all I can say is that in terms of deception, you ain't seen nothing yet. Now, my purpose is not to critique Donald Trump, but simply point out that if you follow the Messiah, then you already have a leader. Don't make the same mistake that the Israelites did when they asked for a man to be their king. The thing despised Shemuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. So Shemuel prayed to Yahuwah, and Yahuwah said to Shemuel, heed the voice of the people in all that they say to you. For they've not rejected you, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. According to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them out of Egypt, even to this day, with which they have forsaken me and served other gods, so they're doing to you also. Now therefore heed their voice. However, you shall solemnly forewarn them and show them the behavior of the king who will reign over them. So Shemuel told all the words of Yahweh to the people who asked him for a king, and he said, this will be the behavior of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for his own chariots and to be his horsemen, and some will run before his chariots. He will appoint captains over his thousands and captains over his 50s. Will set some to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and some to make his weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, and bakers, and he will take the best of your fields, your vineyards, and your olive groves, and give them to his servants. He will take 1/10 of your grain and your vintage, and give it to his officers and servants, and he will take your male servants and your female servants, your finest young men and your donkeys, and put them to his work. He will take 1/10 of your sheep, and you will be his servants. And you will cry out in that day because of your king whom you've chosen for yourselves, and Yahuwah will not hear you in that day. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Shemuel and said, "No, but we will have a king over us, that we also may be like the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles." Well, this was the icing on the cake. It traced back to those 10 wilderness tests that followed the exodus from Egypt. The Israelites' desire for a man was a rejection of Yahuwah. He was supposed to be their husband, but they insisted that he give them a king. He warned them that they would become like slaves, but they didn't care. Well, many Christians are repeating the same mistake. They're yearning for a king to fight for them. But here's the rub. Yahuwah already sent us his son. Yeshua is his man, the son of Adam. The Israelites rejected the father, and the Yahudim later rejected the son. The question now is, who will follow him from the house of Israel? Will the lost sheep of the house of Israel follow Yeshua, or will they ask for another man? Yahuwah sent Yeshua to be our king. He is the lamb that was slain. Yeshua didn't dodge a bullet. He hung on an execution stake and died for us. No man can do for us what he has done for us, and what he will do for us in the future as well. While I hope for the best for America and the world, I've read the last chapter. I know how it ends. The world will either worship the beast or they will worship Elohim. There's no middle ground. And the worship of Elohim involves working in his kingdom, not making America great once again. Over the past several weeks, we've been examining the issue of worship, and we've looked at the first instances of the word shachah. Shachah, there, that's a shin, chet, hey. There's actually another word that means worship, and it's found even earlier in the Torah. That Hebrew word is abad, ayin bet dalet, and while it often is translated as work, it also means worship. The first time that we read the word abad is after Elohim rested and set the seventh day apart. It says, "Thus the heavens and the earth and all the host of them were finished. And on the seventh day Elohim ended his work, which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work, which he had done. Then Elohim blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, set it apart, because in it he rested from all his work, which Elohim had created and made. This is the history of the heavens and the earth when they were created on the seventh day, that Yahuwah Elohim made the earth and the heavens before any plant of the field was in the earth and before any herb of the field had grown. For Yahuwah Elohim had not caused it to rain on the earth, and there was no man, there was no Adam to work, abad, the et ground, the et adamah, but a mist went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground." Notice that the word used to describe Elohim's work was different from the work ascribed to Adam. And there was no Adam to abad, the et adamah. Well, the next time that we read the Hebrew word abad was in the Garden of Eden, the Garden of Paradise. Yahuwah Elohim took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work, to abad it and keep it. The garden was created by Yahuwah first, and then the Adam was placed in the garden to watch over it, which is shamar, and to work it, abad. The Adam was given the responsibility of taking care of something that belonged to Yahuwah, and that's why working the garden was a form of worship. In fact, here's the definition of abad found in Kohlenberger Mont's Hebrew dictionary. It basically says to work, serve, labor, do, to worship, minister, work in ministry. And of course, and later on, serve, worship. To be caused to serve, to worship a god. Well, the Etymological Dictionary of the Hebrew Language by Ernest Klein agrees. It defines abad as to work, to serve, to worship, to obey. The notion of service and obedience being tied to worship continued to the patriarchs, to Israel, the priests, the prophets, the kings, and ultimately the Messiah. When you're in covenant with Yahweh, then your work becomes your service to Yahweh Elohim, and that is how we express our worship toward Him. We honor Him and esteem Him when we submit to His directions and obey Him. It all boils down to what we do, not simply what we say. When the Israelites were in Egypt, they were forced to serve Pharaoh. They were not free. When Moses arrived, he spoke on behalf of Yahweh and told Pharaoh, "Thus says Yahweh Elohim of the Hebrews, let my people go, that they may worship me." Abad. Some translations might say serve, but the point is clear. They were supposed to leave Egypt so that they could serve, worship, obey Yahweh Elohim. It's interesting to note that he was the Elohim of the Hebrews, not the Jewish people. Well, in order to leave and worship, the Israelites had to first shed some blood and become circumcised. They had to bear the sign of the covenant that pointed to the need for a circumcised heart. They had to mark time, count days, select the lamb, slaughter the lamb, place the blood on the door frames with hyssop, eat the lamb with specific. They had to cook the lamb a certain way, eat the lamb with specific side ingredients, stay inside, and then burn any leftovers before sunrise. They had to do all this with specific detail in order to be saved and delivered. Well, the Passover was and is a priestly covenant service. It was not a Levitical service. It was a Melchizedek offering. It pointed to the Melchizedek high priest, Yeshua, and it reminds us that we are priests and our lives are a service to Elohim. Most people are aware of the prophet Zechariah, who's found in what is commonly referred to as the minor prophets. But did you know that there was another prophet named Zechariah who was also a priest in the line of Zadok? He was the father of John the Immerser, and this is what he prophesied. On the 8th day at the circumcision of John, it said, "Blessed is Yahweh Elohim of Israel, for he has visited and redeemed his people, and has raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David. As he spoke by the mouth of his set-apart prophets, who have been since the world began, that we should be saved from our enemies and from the hand of all who hate us, to perform the mercy promised to our fathers, and to remember his set-apart covenant, the oath which he swore to our father Abraham, to grant us that we, being delivered from the hand of our enemies, might serve him without fear, in holiness and righteousness before him all the days of our life. And you child, will be called the prophet of the highest, for you will go before the face of Yahweh to prepare his ways, to give knowledge of salvation to his people by the remission of their sins, through the tender mercy of our Elohim, with which the day spring from on high has visited us, to give light to those who sit in darkness and the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace." Well, did you notice that we are delivered from the hands of our enemies so that we can serve Yahweh without fear? The covenant promises are intended for those who will worship Yahweh through their service. And that's why Yeshua taught that he is looking for profitable servants. He said, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his own ability, and immediately he went on a journey. Then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and made another 5 talents. And likewise he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. But he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I've gained 5 more talents besides them. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your master. He also, who had received 2 talents, came and said, Master, you've delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I've gained 2 more talents besides them. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid, and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. But his master answered and said to him, You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. So take the talent from him, and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, his kabod, and all the set-apart angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his kabod. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats, and he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer to him, saying, Master, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? And the king will answer and say to them, Assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it for one of the least of these my brethren, you did it for me. Then he will also say to those on the left hand, Depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Then they will also answer to him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister to you? Then he will answer them, saying, Assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. Well, I can't tell you how many pastors and preachers that I've heard throughout my life teaching that there's nothing you can do. It's all Jesus. Well, of course, we cannot we cannot earn our salvation through our works. That's a no-brainer. The point is that we're saved for a purpose, and that purpose is to serve the King. We don't just bury our talents and do nothing and wait to be raptured. We invest everything that we have to multiply a return for our Master. He gave us our lives, and we owe him a return on his investment. If you refuse to serve, then you won't be dwelling with the King. He repeatedly warns us that and told us what he expects from us. The King is going to separate his sheep from the goats like a shepherd divides the flock. He's the one who grants entry into the kingdom, and there's nothing here concerning an altar call, asking Jesus into your heart, or being a MAGA Republican. It's about how we worshiped, and that will determine our fate and our final destination. There's a place prepared from the foundation of the world that awaits his sheep. The key is that we want to hear those words, well done. And the way that we hear those words is through our service. If we have been good and faithful servants. While politics deals with inflation, jobs, the economy, borders, and security, these are not the concerns of those in the kingdom of Elohim. Yahweh is our strength and our shield. He's our strong tower, and He's our protector and a provider. People have been conditioned to look to the government for their needs instead of Elohim, or their doctor, or hospital, or prescription drugs, or you name it. They're just buy insurance in case something goes wrong. The safety net the government provides, welfare checks, all these things. We've been conditioned not to look to Elohim for our basic needs, but that's the problem. So many people are currently looking to government for the things that Yeshua told His sheep to be doing, giving food, drink, comfort, and provision to the sick, the poor, and the needy, and those in prison. In fact, Yeshua specifically told us not to worry about all these basic things, all these basic needs. He says, therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow, nor reap, nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? And which of you by being anxious can add a single hour to his lifespan? And why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if Elohim so clothes the grass of the field, which today is alive and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will He not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? Therefore do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the nations seek after these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. But seek ye first the kingdom of Elohim and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. Well, the lesson is clear, and it has always been the same. If we focus on Yahweh and His kingdom first, He will provide all our needs. Not necessarily as we want or we expect, as the Israelites found out, but He will provide what we need. And He's not interested in the politics of the nations or making America great. His focus is on His kingdom and populating that kingdom with those who will worship Him in spirit and in truth. He's not building a political party, a nation, or a coalition of nations separate and apart from His covenant. He is building His kingdom from the nations. And you cannot focus on both, and you cannot serve both. If you observe the Republican National Convention in the past week, it was clear that people were trying to blend Christianity with American politics. Now, you can blend the Roman religion of Christianity with politics because Christianity was actually created by the Roman Empire. Christianity actually works well in an empire. But you cannot blend the politics of man and the covenant with Yahweh. If you want to take hold of the hand of Yahweh, you must let go of the hand of man. These two paths are headed in two different directions. I have no doubt that many of those people at the convention were well-intentioned. I, too, was well-intentioned when I was neck-deep in Christian nationalism and politics 30 years ago. I thought it was a natural step forward for the Christian nation of America. It was time to take dominion, or so I thought, when I was a lawless Christian who didn't understand the covenant renewed by King Messiah. Like I said, I'm sure that they just want the best for their country and their families. In fact, many of the policies promoted there will probably be good for the U.S. economy if implemented. But the problem is that the Christian nationalists are trying to claim the blessings of the covenant people without a shred of obedience. Just because you pray, it doesn't mean that you can claim the blessings of the covenant. The key is whether you worship, and worship involves service. The Republicans are pitching an all-inclusive big tent. You don't have to pray to Jesus. You definitely don't have to worship Yahweh or obey His instructions. You just have to love America and put America first. Can you see the problem with that? It's a recipe for disaster, and I hope that it's clear for those who follow the true Messiah of the true covenant assembly of Israel. In politics, the nation of America is the focus, not Yahuwah. Republicans are willing to sprinkle some God here and there, but not too much, unless they offend any potential voters, at least for now. Big changes are on the horizon if they can implement Project 2025, developed by the Heritage Foundation. Ultimately, Republicans can pray all they want, but what America really needs to do is repent. They need to turn to Yahuwah, not a mortal man. And did you see the energy, excitement, love, affection, and adoration given to their man? That should be reserved for Yahuwah Elohim, not a presidential candidate. These campaign events actually border on religious services, and those who follow Yeshua need to be set apart. We don't look to a president or a government. We look to Yahuwah. He will provide for those who seek him and obey him. His directions are righteous and righteousness. If you've read the scriptures all the way through, then you understand that the end involves great deception that will include deceiving those elected to serve Yahuwah, and it will involve people drunk on the wine of Babylon. In fact, the scriptures describe that people will be focused on making Babylon great. I spent a chapter in my book, The Final Shofar, describing how America is a part of Mystery Babylon. Just take a look at the back of the American dollar bill. The God that America places its trust in is not Yahuwah. Rather, it's the God represented by the eye hovering over the pyramid. Remember that when the text of Revelation was written, the ancient city of Babylon had already lost its prominence after Alexander the Great died in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar II in 323 BCE. Babylon the Great and Mystery Babylon are not referring to the ruins of an ancient city in the modern-day Iraq. It's the world religious and economic system that's uniting mankind in rebellion to Yahuwah once again. America is currently at the heart of that movement that began at the Tower of Babel. And that's why the United Nations is located in Manhattan, the same island where the U.S. government initially operated from at Federal Hall. And interestingly, that's also where former President Trump has his famous Trump Tower. When you understand that the culmination of the covenant plan is to draw the nations back to Yahuwah, it's clear that making America great does not fall in Yahuwah's final plan. His focus is all about reversing the Tower of Babel and gathering a people who will worship him in spirit and in truth. Babylon is man's attempt to unite and govern the planet in opposition to Yahuwah. America is a big part of that plan. She is drunk with power and governed by corrupt and compromised individuals who are either blackmailed or bought off. The world is drunk with the wine of adultery, and that wine is purchased with the American dollar bill. The wine that we want to be drinking is the living waters turned into wine by Yeshua. We want to be drinking his wine at his wedding feast, served at the marriage supper of the Lamb. So as we make our way through this election cycle, make sure to choose the right leader. The patriarch Yeshua, often called Joshua, was an example and a pattern for Messiah Yeshua. He began as a servant, and he did not fear the giants. He worshipped Yahuwah and was allowed to lead the next generation into the promised land. This is what he told Israel. He said, if it seems evil to you to serve Yahuwah, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve Yahuwah. Well, many are called, but few are chosen. We all have a choice to make, and I pray that you choose to serve Yahuwah alone, because that is your worship. Well, Barakot, my name is Todd Bennett from Shema Israel. Shalom.